Well then, today is a new day, it's a new week. For Mythic Plus, it's a new reset. What we have gotten from Blizzard is a list of bug fixes, which Blizzard continues to go over after 9.0.5 has birthed a lot of them. But also, more importantly, what we have to go over first is class changes, buffs, more simply. Beast Mastery, Marksmanship, Windwalker, and Demonology Warlock. So starting from the tiniest one, Demonology Warlock has been buffed in spell and pet damage by 3%. This is, of course, a pretty tiny buff, which continues on the buffs that Demonology has received. Just in 9.0.5, Cold Dreadstalkers and the Dreadstalkers' abilities were buffed by 10% in damage, and now they're getting this overall damage increase. Demonology Warlock, as per stats, it is the least represented of the Warlock specs. It is less than 2 times, nearly a third of the times represented than Destruction. Not even Affliction, just Destruction when it comes to Mythic Plus. And even when it comes to the popularity in raids, it is 5 to 6 times less popular than Destruction. And that's just compared to Destruction. I didn't want to sound mean and say it's 37 times less popular than Affliction, which it is. Of course, this change is not going to be catastrophic. Blizzard is pointing out in these changes that these are just some minor changes. This patch was not intended to be a significant shakeup to current damage balance. Of course, it's a hotfix. You're never going to get a significant shakeup to damage balance in hotfixes. This should be known already. So yeah, it's better than nothing, but it's not going to change much. The much more important changes are around Windwalker Monk and, more importantly, Marksmanship. Beast Mastery as well got a buff. So Beast Mastery has gotten a buff to Beast Cleave. Now Beast Cleave is going to get your pet to strike other targets for 90% of your pet's damage instead of 75%. This is still pretty good. It's a pretty decent change. Of course, Beast Cleave still has the problem that it's capped at 6 enemies, your main target, and 5 extra. So for most groups, when it comes to most pugs, most groups in Mythic Plus, for example, hitting 6 targets is like the norm. You're not gonna pull more than 6 targets too many times, so you're not gonna get too fucked up by your target cap that you have on your Beast Cleave. Beast Cleave is the vast majority of a Beast Mastery Hunter's AoE. It is also why it has lost so much more popularity compared to Marksmanship. If we go, for example, to the previous expansion, in terms of AoE, in terms of Mythic Plus representation, Beast Mastery was the king, not Marksmanship. So yes, it's not going to fix the target cap problem of Beast Mastery, but it's going to increase the effectiveness of Beast Mastery at lower targets. This is also much better when it comes to 2 to 3 target cleave in raid encounters. Think about Inerva, for example, on 2 to 3 targets extra. This is pretty good. Even to a degree, the Nathrius, Stone Legion Generals, these type of fights where you can often have 2 to 3 targets next to each other. Beast Cleave can do fine. Of course, you have a pet. You're fucked for other reasons on the Nathrius, honestly, but, you know, still. When it comes to popularity, of course, Beast Mastery isn't as bad as Demonology, but it is still wildly less popular than Marksmanship, about 4 to 5 times less popular in Mythic Plus, roughly the same 5 to 6 times less popular in raid encounters. Still, though, what we have to mention is that it has been rising recently. However, it has been rising because of the slight demise of Marksmanship given by the hotfix. So, talking about the main course here for these changes, Marksmanship and Windwalker. Those were the 2 specs hit by the bug fixes. So, what are we talking about? Marksmanship has gotten a bug fix in 9.0.5 because Wild Spirits was bugged. Wild Spirits caused your Serpent Stalker's Trickery legendary, which caused you to cast a Serpent Sting when you were using aim shot to trigger Wild Spirits twice. Because of course you were casting the aim shot plus the free Serpent Sting from your legendary, so Wild Spirit AoE was triggering twice. This was nerfed. It no longer triggered twice. It basically no longer took into account the Serpent Stings from your legendary. This heavily reduced the AoE power of Marksmanship. Not as much as single target. The single target, of course, was not as impacted because you didn't get that many targets to hit extra with the procs, but the AoE was particularly hit. And the AoE is the strong point of Marksmanship. Their burst AoE, more precisely. Wild Spirits, your true shot, tons of casts of aim shot, tons of procs of your legendary, which also made your Wild Spirit proccing twice, so more AoE damage, etc, etc. So Blizzard went for a controversial change. Their explanation for this hotfix is that in the 9.0.5 update, bug fixes had the side effect of reducing overall damage. Because the damage loss was enough to cause some potential disruption to balance, we are compensating both specs. So basically, we didn't plan for Hunter to do that much damage with Wild Spirits, but hey, they had this much damage for 5 months, so now if we remove it, they're losing damage, so now we're just gonna compensate with giving them more damage. yeah, controversial change. Regardless, people are going to be triggered either way. If Hunter was compensated, people would have complained. If Hunters weren't getting compensated, then Hunters would have complained. So nobody would have won either way. There would have been one side left to complain. Anyways, one could say they have had this for free for 5 months. Now that you fixed it, why are you giving them something back? They kept for 5 months something they should not have had. This is unfair. Particularly, I'm sure these complaints are gonna come from specs like, of course, Beast Mastery, maybe like Demonology, specs that have been performing much worse than Marksmanship. Because, if you listen to Marksmanship players, by now Marksmanship was doing tank damage, Marksmanship was about to get declined from normal raids, but when in reality, it wasn't. Either way, whichever side you're taking in this, Blizzard is compensating. Aim shot damage has been increased by 5%, and trick shots now causes your aim shot or rapid fire to ricochet for 55% of the damage instead of 50. Now, this is going to increase both your steady, continuous damage as well as your burst damage. Of course, your burst damage is not going to be increased as much as prior to the Wild Spirits fix. However, your sustained damage is going to be increased, particularly your single target damage, because as mentioned, the Wild Spirits change wasn't that detrimental to single target, but this 5% overall damage increase to aim shot is a pretty nice buff for single target. So this might, unironically, make Marksmanship players fall on their feet even better than they were before when it comes to single target, which is hilarious, honestly. Their overall power is still going to be reduced, because their main power, as I mentioned, was burst. They were wanted and needed for burst. If you wanted sustain single target, you would have picked an elemental shaman, you would have picked a shadow priest, not a marksmanship hunter. But at least now it looks like they're going to be changed in a way that they're not going to be losing as much, if they're going to lose anything at all. In AoE, it's still a nerf, like there is no way around it. Even with this change, you're still nerfed in AoE. Now over to Windwalker, because we are in the same situation. Now Windwalker sprouted another bug. What a surprise. Right before this change, a new bug centered around spinning crane kick came out. Windwalker is basically a matryoshka of bugs. Whenever you fix one, there is another one nested within that pops out of nowhere. These are just the bugs fixed in 9.0.5. These are the number of bugs that a normal, well-functioning spec usually gets fixed throughout an entire expansion, and Windwalker got these fixed in a single, smaller patch. So, yeah, they have problems. During 9.0.5, Blizzard also hotfixed another thing, a problem with Dance of Chi-Ji. You might be like, the talent? No, not the talent, the Azerite trait. The Azerite trait which inspired the talent. Yes, because before that there was another problem with spinning crane kick, which Blizzard fixed. However, in fixing that, they broke Dance of Chi-Ji. So they had to go and fix Dance of Chi-Ji. Even though it was an Azerite armor trait from BFA, from level 50, so the damage it was doing was irrelevant. Who the fuck even figured it out? Who is even still playing with BFA gear? However, this trait was broken and doing 10 times the damage, so Blizzard had to go and fix it. However, in fixing Dance of Chi-Ji, they broke spinning crane kick. So now, for a few hours, for like 20 hours or so, spinning crane kick no longer was affected by mastery. The mastery of Windwalker, which makes you do more damage if your ability is not a duplicate, a repeat of the previous. So as long as you're using a different ability every time, you're going to be doing extra damage based on your mastery number, 30% or something. This, of course, is a disastrous bug for AoE, for Mythic Plus, where you want to use spinning crane kick for AoE damage, and it would have been very, very bad to keep this bug going for long. There are plenty of bugs still in the game that have been in the game for months. They're not even 1/50th as bad as this one. So of course Blizzard in this hotfix is fixing it, resolved an issue with spinning crane kick that prevented the ability from gaining benefit from the mastery combo strikes. Cool, but that's not all, because Windwalker was also the other spec that was hit with the previous bug fix. Similar to Marksmanship, Windwalker had another bug. One of the ones I pointed out being fixed in 9.0.5 was this one. The fact that when you turned yourself, you split yourself into your clones from Stormant and Fire. If you started channeling spinning crane kick and then immediately cancelled it with your other abilities, your other rotation abilities, your clones would continue channeling Fist of Fury and still doing the damage you were doing with your abilities, so effectively getting a free channel of Fist of Fury. This was a good part of the reason why Windwalker had been risen in ranks, risen in popularity and in performance over time, over a few weeks, that we reported over time in Mythic Plus and Raids, and it got fixed. The performance, as we also reported on, of both Marksmanship and Windwalker dropped by quite a bit. Their popularity was already starting to drop. Marksmanship up to a few weeks ago was the #1 most represented spec in raids. All it took was just 10 days of this bug fix, and Hunter already lost in popularity to both Fire Mage and Balanced Druid in raids, and it just took 10 days to lose that #1 spot. So Windwalker is getting the same treatment. Blizzard did fix the bug, however they are compensating for it. So spinning crane kick damage is increased by 15% per unique target you have struck in the last 20 seconds. So 15 instead of 10, and then in the last 20 seconds instead of the last 15. You know, even if you're just pulling a pack with 4 enemies, let's say, or even 5, let's say 5, this goes from giving you 50% more damage to giving you 75%, which is noticeable when it comes to AoE damage. The duration that is going to persist of this buff, going from 15 to 20, is also pretty good when you take in mind Mythic Plus, you know, going from one pack to the next. You know, you pull a big pack, you are left with 1 or 2 mobs, so you're slowing down, and then you have to kill these last 2, and then you have to start running to the next pack. Maybe you don't have the time to keep up this buff, for example, or to refresh this buff because you're going to be losing the stacks anyways. But it is still a, you know, a good extra quality of life change on top of the damage you're gaining extra. The other buff is to Fist of Fury. Fist of Fury now deals 70% damage to secondary targets instead of 50. So this is not really going to fix, or not fix, but add anything to single target. Also, it's not going to fix the problem that for a while, for a long time, Fist of Fury seemed to be bugged. What a surprise. It wasn't actually hitting up to 5 other targets, so your main targets plus 5, but it was only hitting 5, so the main target plus 4. I guess it's just another bug to pile to the list of Windwalker bugs. But, you know, in a utopian world where the bugs weren't there, these are both some pretty nice AoE buffs to Windwalker. Of course, the bug fix that Windwalker received in 9.0.5 was hurting them a lot in AoE, so these buffs are obviously aimed at trying to shore the AoE damage they have lost from the bug fix. It's going to be interesting to see, eventually, in the end, when the smoke clears, whether or not they're going to end up doing more or less damage than before. What is also important to point out is that now we have some sort of precedent to what we can expect when it comes to Vengeance Demon Hunter. Because, as reported, we have another bug. Because in our list of Easter egg bug hunting, we also had a bug surfacing for Vengeance, which made them take upwards of 20-25% less magical damage than they normally would have. So what can we expect from this? Now we have an answer, because we have seen what happened to Windwalker and what happened to Marksmanship when their bugs that were buffing them were fixed, which is a compensation. So it does seem like, at least on the surface, that Blizzard is also going to apply some sort of compensation to the inevitable bug fixing that will happen to Vengeance. It is, though, going to be interesting because when it comes to DPS, very low IQ, grug, simple-minded playstyle is just damage. So the bug fix hurt your AoE, fine, compensate with AoE. The bug fix hit your single target, fine, compensate with single target. For Vengeance, it's a case of magical damage taken buff. It's a much more narrow window of buffs available to you, available to the spec that you can give out. So it's going to be interesting to see which side Blizzard is going to tackle when it comes to the compensation. Now, moving beyond these, there were also a couple more bug fixes, or rather bugs that Blizzard had been chasing. One was the bug related to Let Go of the Past. This is one of Pelagos' passive soulbind abilities, the one that got changed. Another word for nerfed from the beta. This was the one that used to give you mastery on proc and make Kiri and Pelagos super strong in the beta. It was eventually nerfed before release to give you magical damage taken reduction. The problem, and I like to believe this was discovered because of what happened to Vengeance. You know, because of the magical damage drama around Vengeance, people started looking into those abilities. They started looking into the Demonic Wards passive, they started looking into the Viscous Ink conduit, and then they started looking into Let Go of the Past. The 3 things that were giving magical damage taken reduction to Vengeance. And someone, you know, almost inadvertently discovered that Let Go of the Past was broken. Because this is Let Go of the Past. This is your mitigated magical damage taken from this ability, and the damage you're taking is higher when Let Go of the Past is enabled. And as soon as Let Go of the Past disappears, the damage goes down again. Very simply, someone changed a minus to a plus. So Let Go of the Past, instead of giving you minus 3% magical damage taken, was suddenly giving you plus 3% magical damage taken. So effectively, you were taking 6% more damage. Instead of taking minus 3, you were taking plus 3. This was hotfixed recently, right before this new round of hotfixes. And after that, Blizzard is still hunting for more bugs. More reports about Starfall being broken for Balanced Druids, for example. After 9.0.5, Starfall seems to have regressed back to its old habit of pulling mobs out of combat with Starfall. Like here, for example, the two mobs here getting aggroed by Starfall even though they're not in combat with you. There is still a pre-existing, much older bug, which is the fact that Starfall cannot differentiate between you being in combat and other mobs being in combat with each other. So all those dungeons that have mobs fighting among themselves are still gonna get pulled by your Starfall if your Starfall is in range, because your Starfall just thinks those mobs are in combat with you. So that is still there, and now we are getting this one back again. So that's another one that Blizzard will have to fix. In the meantime, they are nerfing raid bosses. This time, they are nerfing Sludgefist and Stone Legion generals. Now, in the past, I think 4 rounds of nerfs, people had been repeating every time, how did Stone Legion generals get away with it? Because every time people sort of targeted SLG as being the hardest of the raid encounters, and yet every time they were just getting away with not getting any nerfs. What made people even more frustrating is that on top of being the more difficult, it's also the more frustrating. Or rather, the least fun fight, we can say. So the nerfs. Sludgefist is getting Fractured Debris, Missile, travel time increased to 2.5 seconds from 1.5 seconds. So you have more time to react to the debris falling on the ground. However, I don't like this nerf. This is purely just a reaction nerf. 1.5 seconds to just sidestep was enough. I don't think this was needed, honestly. Destructive Stomp radius has been decreased to 16 yards instead of 20. This is just a help for melee. Similar to the Fractured Debris nerf, it's not that needed, honestly. It's not that major. And then Chain Link, allowable range increased to 14 yards instead of 12. So literally not a single number, damage, healing number at all has been changed. This has been essentially a round of positional nerfs. You have more time to dodge the debris, you have more time to run away from the stomp, and you have more window, more room to move around with Chain Link. That's pretty much all. Now the actual number nerfs are coming for Stone Legion generals. Volatile Stone Shells, the Absorb channel has been increased to 5 seconds instead of 4. So previously the Stone Shell channel was reduced in the amount of damage you needed to do, and now it lasts 1 second longer. So you have even extra time to actually break this. The Wicked Blast damage has been decreased by 15% on Mythic difficulty. This is particularly significant when it comes to damage, as well as Wicked Laceration, damage being decreased by 10% on Mythic difficulty. Anima Orb duration has been increased to 20 seconds instead of 15. This is a more minor quality of life change. Volatile, Anima Infusion, and the Anima Infection, same thing. The duration has gone up to 20 seconds instead of 16. Again, basically giving you more time to move around with these. As well as the Volatile Anima Detonation, having the radius decreased to 40 yards instead of 45. Another one of the bigger changes is Soul Taint Effigy. Now it's gonna stack all the way up to 80% healing reduction instead of 100. Yes, this is still not gonna make it good. Like, the entire point of the mechanic is not about, oh yeah, at least now we can heal each other. You're still supposed to go through with this without needing to heal. So now that it's been nerfed to 80%, in fact, it might even be bad because it's gonna bait people into thinking, now at least we can heal. That's still not really how you should go about this mechanic. So Blizzard now turned this into a noob trap. And lastly, an easier time when it comes to dealing with the Stonegale Effigy. The wind blowing you away. The movement force of this wind has been reduced by 20%. Now, these are very major nerfs, by the way. One might say that they are basically trivializing the fight. Nerfing the orbs this way, the duration, basically means you don't need any sort of tight rotation of players to deal with these orbs. No staggering, no delaying people picking them up is going to be needed either. No risks of getting pushed off when you get the explosion either. The Wicked Blast damage, the 15%, is also major. Basically surviving double hits now, which is supposed to be a fatal mistake. By all means, now you can still live. The noob trap of the Soul Taint, even though it's a noob trap, is still gonna make it trivial, because now even if you fuck up, you can still get healed, and basically as a last resort, you can still not die from this. Whereas before, if you fucked up and you forgot to clear it, you were dead. In the end, Stone Legion Generals is a lot about timings, much like Blizzard likes to do nowadays. You know, the hardest part of a boss, if you are lower down in progression, think like Zymox. The hardest part of progression is when multiple abilities, Blizzard teaches you the abilities throughout the fight. You know, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, you start seeing the abilities, and then they start overlapping more and more. And then in the end, there are these big overlaps where a bunch of stuff is happening at the same time. And if it happens in the wrong way, if it happens in the wrong overlaps, you're gonna die. This is gonna help a lot for Stone Legion Generals' particular overlapping of abilities. But then again, a quick survey around tells me literally nobody will be sad at this because everybody hated this fight, so I guess who cares. And with this last round of changes, we are done for the day. That was all that was to report for the day. There's been a couple more things, like the Burning Crusade beta being accessible, except it wasn't because Blizzard fucked up and they didn't mean to. So that's a thing. So for now, we can leave here. We're going to see eventually how much these nerfs are going to affect the fights. We're going to see how much these compensation buffs are going to affect particularly Marksmanship and Windwalker, given how much they, I guess, fell in performance before. So for now, I leave you. See you guys soon. In the meantime, I wonder how many bugs are left in store.